Hey guys, this is Echo Soundworks, and you are checking out a mixing/production tip and trick tutorial on ADSR. So in this video, I'm going to show you 5 techniques or methods that will help you widen any sound in the mix. Now, these techniques range from panning methods to micro shifting to pitch manipulation and even some EQ. So they work on a wide range of sounds. Now, that being said, there is really no right or wrong when you're trying to widen the sound. Sometimes I've thought, okay, the Haas effect is going to be the winner for vocal, and then actually micro shifting just sounded way better, was more unique, more interesting, it just sat in the mix better. So it really depends on what's going on in your mix, and I guess it also depends on how creative you want to get with it. So definitely play around with these techniques. I know probably the most common one is the Haas effect. Most of you guys have probably heard about that, but there's some other more interesting, at least in my opinion, there are a little bit more interesting ways to widen sounds in the mix. So let's just check it out. All right, so we're in Logic now. And before we actually get into these techniques for the intermediate or beginner users out there, I just want to really quickly just touch on why this is important. So in any mix, you're going to have some things that are almost always going to be in the center of the mix. Things like your kick, your snare, your bass, and your lead vocal, and sometimes the actual lead of a synth, perhaps. So it can be very hard to get some of the accented sounds or instruments to show up in the mix clearly and present without having to turn them up or make them kind of just get lost in the mix. And that's where stereo imaging and widening comes into play. So at its basic, most fundamental level, it's panning. You're panning things out left and right. Well, you can't always do that, especially in certain genres like EDM, pop, hip-hop, where you're working with synths and virtual instruments and things like that. Because if you take the same sound and you pan it out left and right, like I'm doing right now, the ear doesn't hear it any differently than just having one. It just makes it louder.
Once again.
Right? That doesn't sound doubled. It doesn't sound any like there's anything going on. So with vocals, preferably you're going to double it. You're going to have the singer double it. Now, that's not always a possibility, whether from the singer can't do doubles or you paid for an a cappella or something and they didn't do it, right? So that's where you might have to do these widening techniques. Now, these widening techniques, I think they have 2 purposes. One is to make things work how they need to in the mix, right? So you can actually hear your harmonies, you can hear certain sounds a little bit clearer, and then also to support the main driving focus or instrumentation of the track, right? So whether that's the kick, the snare, the lead vocal, these types of techniques will strengthen those elements of the mix because you're getting sounds out of their way. You're letting them breathe more. And then the second purpose is really just stylistic, right? It's a creative kind of a choice. It can be really cool to have certain sounds out really wide. It can fit certain like ambient, ethereal vibes. Really depends on the song, of course. All right, with that being said, let's just check out the first kind of tip and trick or method here to widen any sound, and it's a bit of a letdown. I'm going to be completely honest with you. The first way in which you can widen any sound is a stereoizing plugin, a plugin dedicated to making things sound wider, adding some stereo effects, right? I know a lot of you are probably like, well, screw that. This is like a no-brainer. Well, I wanted to do this one first because I don't know, it is a no-brainer, but I wanted to touch on it in this video. Not touching on it would be bad. I get tons of comments being like, well, what about plugins for it? So I have a plugin on my screen right now called VoxBox. I don't know why it's called VoxBox. I use this all the time on synths, guitars, whatever. It really doesn't have to be vocals. This is essentially just 2 stereo channels. It splits your signal into 2 stereo channels, and you can control the gain and the width of those channels. And you also can turn down the dry signal, which should be up the middle. So here is our vocal.
On my own once again.
Here it is with VoxBox on.
On my own once again.
So here's the gain up all the way on the width and the width all the way up on both channels.
On my own once again.
So let's turn down the center control now.
On my own once again, break it.
So most of these stereoizing plugins are just well-skinned, well-optimized, coarse phasing and delay plugins all in one. You could get the exact same effect in your DAW right now with probably a sample delay and some coarse. But this interface is nice, it's quick and easy, and I pulled this one up on purpose because A, I really like it, B, it's really cheap. I believe it's under like $25. It's always going on sale. I think I picked it up for like $15. So it's pretty fun, pretty easy to use. Now, the controls I have it at right now are way too extreme for this example. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn down the center vocal here, and we're just going to do something like this. Let's turn the width down to about 65, 70%.
On my own.
So let's play this with the lead vocal now.
On my own once again, break it off.
Let's turn it off. So now there's no stereo effect.
On my own once again, break it off, take me back.
See how it kind of makes it like wrap around the center vocal when you're listening there? And that's a nice effect with the actual music.
On my own once again, break it off, take me back.
Right, so stereoizing plugins. Plugins that are dedicated towards stereo widening. There's one in Isotope that's really popular, but a little bit more expensive. There are some free ones out there as well, but if you guys don't have one, you don't need to stress or fret. You can definitely do this in your DAW with minimal fuss. All right, the second tip and trick is I think it's one of the most famous ones for one of the most, I don't know if these things can be famous, but it's one of the more talked about ones. It's called the Haas effect, Hass. And basically, it just involves duplicating your signal or duplicating your tracks, panning one left, panning one right, and then on one of the channels, adding a delay that's usually working in milliseconds or in samples. So I have Logic's sample delay pulled up here, and I have it set to milliseconds because it's easier to see. So I'm going to pan this first one. Well, we'll pan to the left. And I have the track duplicated over here, and we're going to pan this one to the right. So I will name this R for you guys so you can see. All right, so we have to the right. And I'm going to, so we're working with this track here, the one on the left. Now if I play this,
On my own,
again, there's no change. But if I start to mess with the delay left channel, on the sample delay in Logic,
on my own once again, break it off. On my own once
we start to get a widening effect.
on my own once again.
And we can check this visually on our phase correlation meter.
On my own once again, break it off.
So we're near stereo, kind of dipping into antiphase. And we can see on our actual goniometer here and our analyzer,
On my own once again.
it is in fact a stereo signal. Now let's turn off this delay.
On my own once again, break it.
And you can see that it's completely mono. So the Haas effect, very simple, very powerful tool.
On my own once again, break.
So you can actually build on all these ideas. You don't have to just do one or the other. We could do a little bit of Voxbox. We could do a little bit of sample delay. I probably wouldn't mix Voxbox and sample delay, but I will mix some of these other techniques and see kind of how it works in the scope of the mix. It doesn't just have to be one, but this effect, very easy to do. You can use it on a multitude of sounds. Now, if you're wondering why this works, essentially just by delaying it by a couple milliseconds, the start time of all the words are just going to be a little bit different, but it's not going to be so different that the ear is kind of hearing up on or picking up on an actual delay. Like when she says on, I think she says on. Yeah, on. It's not like we're going to hear on, my, own. It's just on my own still. You're just hearing the slight differences. It's like if I double a guitar, it's nearly impossible to get a perfect double where your phase, everything is just lining right up, right? And that makes the double sound thicker though. So that's all the Haas effect is doing at its core. So let's just turn that off for now. And let's look at another technique here. The third technique we'll be looking at is micro shifting. Now, this one we're going to need to do one more double because you want one in the center as well as two out left and right. So I'm going to pan this one to the center. So I'm going to name this C for center, then we have left and right. So micro shifting is not time-based, it's pitch-based. So the micro shifting name comes from shifting the pitch, and the reason it's called micro, obviously, is because really small amounts of pitch shifting. And you can do this with a plugin or you can do it in some DAW. So I know Ableton's incredibly easy. It's actually pretty easy in Logic now too. So I'm gonna just pitch one up and one down. So we're gonna go fine tune.
On my own.
Right? These are, it's not like I'm transposing it whole semitones. We're just going to go -3, and then let's go up 3 on this one. So we'll go fine tune up 3.
On my own, once again, break it off, take me.
Right? So now we've kind of changed the pitch of those. If we play all 3 together.
On my own, once again, break it off, take me back.
We can see we have a wide signal.
On my own, once again, break it off.
And I can turn down the middle one if I so choose, if it's a little bit too much, kind of competing with the actual lead.
On my own, once again, break it off.
But you usually want to keep part of it in there, just because you usually want to keep some center in there. Otherwise, it can sound a little bit weird, a little bit like hollow, I guess. But sometimes it works reducing the volume quite a bit. So there is micro shifting. It's a pretty easy thing to do, especially in most modern DAWs. Now you can also use plugins to do this. So let's check that out real quick. One of my favorite pitch manipulation plugins is made by Sound Toys. It's called Little Alter Boy. It's ridiculously cool. So if I have that loaded up right here, Little Alter Boy, and this allows me to mess with format as well as pitch, right? So if I have the pitch up 0.2 on this one, and if I bring Little Alter Boy into this one, I'm going to bring the pitch down to 0.8. And let me make sure my actual regions are back to their normal pitch. They are. So this is just Alter Boy now.
On my own, once again, break it off, take me back.
Right, so let's go back into this. 0.8 is a little bit too much. So I'm gonna hold down Shift as I do this to get more fine control over the value.
On my own, once again, break it.
Right, so now if we play these all together.
On my own, once again.
Quite pronounced shifting effect, right? So I could leave the one panned out to the left pretty much at just 0. We might go, let's go negative 0.1.
On my own.
Now another thing you can do here is you can change the format slightly. So we can keep the pitch the same. So I'm gonna double click to get that back to 0 on both of these. And we can actually format shift the pitch. Or format, not the pitch, but just change the format a little bit. So we're gonna go positive and negative.
On my own, once again, break it off, take me back.
And now it's kind of like getting into the realm of panning two different sounds all together.
On my own, once again, break it off.
And on vocals specifically, even guitars and certain lead sounds, this can be a really cool effect. It's pretty subtle, so if we play it with all three sources, the center as well as the wide ones.
On my own, once again, break it off, take me. On my own, once again, break it off, take me.
You know, so that's kind of like I didn't want to make that its own separate one, but it's kind of a cool tip and trick to kind of expand on that. Micro shifting, not just the pitch. If you have the ability to manipulate the format, try it out. It can sound really cool on guitars and just instruments you would never really think of. All right, so let's get into the next method here, which will be our fourth one. And this one excels really well with synths and synth presets from soft synths like Serum, Massive, etc. So what we'll be looking at in this fourth example just utilizes EQ. You need an EQ that can allow you to section off the left and the right channels. So I have a really basic progression here worked up outside the vocal to show you how this sounds on synth. So we got a bass, we got some drums, and then this default patch lead, straight fire, right? In Serum. All right, so if I solo that lead and I look at our multimeter. All right, so it's not completely mono, right? There is, well, let me unpan it. It's panned not to the center. And so there's like a little bit of width, right? But if you wanted to widen this sound up in your mix, you can use EQ. So we're gonna load up FabFilter Pro Q2, and this isn't the only EQ you can do this in. There's lots of EQs that allow you to do this. But basically what you're gonna do is you're gonna boost some frequencies on the left and then maybe cut those on the right or vice versa. So I'm gonna right click on this stereo placement. I want, let's boost that on the left. So now our sound's gonna be a little bit wider just because there is a difference. Our left channel has some high frequency, some boost in the high frequency. So let's go to our right, and we're gonna cut that. So we'll do right. All right, let's add a little bit of mids now, maybe to the right as well. And let's cut some of the low end maybe on the left. All right, so let's. right? Clearly, it's a little bit louder in the mix. Now, you have to push this quite hard on certain sounds to get a really, really wide amount of separation. And I would say, in my experience, that's not the purpose of this. It's not going to be as dramatic of an effect as like a Haas effect or, some of the tonal manipulation that we looked at before. But it can be really subtle and allows you maybe to use one of the other techniques in a very, very subtle way. So, for instance, we could then load up the Voxbox. And we could just have this be, very, very subtle now. And we're kind of adding some width in stages here. So I have the gain, all of it's pretty much set to, 20% and under essentially. Right, so that's a pretty wide sound in comparison to. And if we play chords with the EQ that we had on, it'll be a more pronounced effect. So let's turn off the Voxbox. So it's just the EQ, right? The left and right manipulation. Let's look at our multimeter and I'm gonna play a chord sound. Let's turn off the EQ. Now, the key to getting that to work is to think about, well, what side of my mix might have a hole? I just did this kind of, showing you how it sounds and how to do it. If this was an actual mix, I would kind of think ahead to, okay, well, I need to make some room for the side that I'm boosting things on because this isn't just boosting the frequencies, it's actually going to increase the volume on those channels. So I might be like, okay, the left side of my mix is a little bit quieter than the right side of my mix, or I might set it up like that, and that might be the side that I boost the frequencies on, and then maybe the right is a little bit busier, or I set it up that way again. That might be the side where I start cutting, attenuating some of those frequencies. So let's look at our fifth way, and that's going to involve reverb. So let's go back to our vocal section over here, and
on my own once again, break on my.
So here is our dry and raw vocal. Now I'm going to zoom in. So I really like this technique on vocals. I actually haven't really seen this one done how I'm doing it. So this is kind of something that I've just done and had some success with. So I've rolled with it from time to time. What you're going to do is you're going to set up 2 aux sends or 2 buses, whatever your DAW likes to call them. And you're going to load up your favorite reverb plugin. I'm using FabFilter Pro R because it has the EQ, because this allows me to kind of employ 2 techniques at once. It allows me to employ this reverb technique we're looking at, as well as kind of the changing the frequencies on the left and the right, for even more separation. So what you're gonna do is you're gonna turn your decay or your size down really quite small, right? So this is our sound if I solo the bus here, bus 16.
On my own, once again, break it off, take me back.
So let's listen to both the actual signal as well as the reverb coming from our bus.
On my own, once again, break it.
Right, so that's wider already. So what I did was I panned out the reverb, and it's really small space. So it's not gonna take up huge chunks of my mix. It's not gonna, wash over the mix. And the pre-delay is kind of getting into the realm of the Haas effect, right? So what you're gonna do is you're gonna duplicate, or not duplicate, but rather create another aux or another bus and load up that same reverb. And you're gonna pan that one to the left. So this is our left reverb signal right now.
On my own, once again, break it off, take me back.
Here's both together with the original.
On my own, once again. On my own, once again, break it off, take.
And we can see with our multimeter and our analyzer here, we have a wide sound. So in bus 17, what I did was I just loaded up the same reverb. So this is our left channel, put on the left side of the screen. This is our right channel. Now the space, everything is pretty much identical. This is just me, I might have just tweaked it a little bit. Everything looks pretty much the same up here. The difference is the pre-delay, obviously panning one out to the left, one to the right. And then I changed the EQ, and that's why I like using the FabFilter Pro R for this, because it kind of takes from that last technique we looked at where you use EQ and change the left versus the right channel. So this has kind of got all three going for it, right? Reverb, a little bit of Haas effect with the pre-delay. It's kind of the same realm idea, right? And then we have this EQ, and it gets a really nice wide sound. All right, so I want to look at one bonus tip and trick here for all the synth guys. If you're not a synth guy, this might not be relevant for you, but I get asked this question a lot, actually. People will see my tutorials and they'll look at the session and they'll see that I got like a pluck mellow harp left, pluck mellow harp right, and they're like, why did I do that? Are you an idiot type thing? They'll be like, you can't just pan things out left and right. Well, if they could see into the preset, they would know that I changed some things up on the actual preset itself. So I have the default saw patch loaded up again in Serum because it's just straight fire. Such a good sound. And we're going to duplicate this. And we're going to do just some synthesis things, I guess I should say, to kind of create some stereo width. Now, obviously, we could change the pitch. Obviously, we could add unison, detune, all that sort of stuff. But this is before that. There's things you can do other than that. So I use this a lot when I have a lead. And I really like how the lead sounds, but I want to pan it left and right and duplicate it. I then do these types of techniques. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to jump into this right one over here. And I'm going to change so I'll have this one be the default color Serum, and this one will be the Echo Soundworks skin. So this one's left, this one's right. And I'm going to change the phase and where it triggers in random in Serum. And you can do this in a lot of synths. So let's turn this phase up and we'll do random, right? Now, let's say the sound was a saw sound or it was a square sound. You can also just change the waveform up. These are identical waveforms. There's a bunch of ways to get a saw waveform, right? So let's go in this one. I'm going to create a saw waveform that kind of is a little bit bulbous. I hope that's the right word. And so this will still be a saw tone for sure. So if we play this, so it's still saw, right? But now it's a slightly different wave. And so it's not going to be a huge amount of change, but if we use the kind of phase, the random, plus tweak the wave a little. So I'll play these both together now, and I'll play a chord. Right, that's a pretty wide sound, and it's that's almost identical in Serum. So that's what I'm doing in some of those synth patches that if you guys have ever asked, well, why am I just panning out left and right? It's because I'm tweaking some stuff in the actual preset, making some real slight changes that will change the left signal and the right signal just enough to make the sound a little bit wider. All right, guys, that sums up our look at 5 ways to widen any sound. If you have any questions or comments, let me know below, and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. Like I said at the beginning of the video, I'm Echo Soundworks. Thank you so much for watching, guys. I'll see you next time.